Hello.
Welcome to the episode of Work Hard. It's Saturday morning with your host, Jason, and my co-host, Ethan. We're just going to mix it up. I'm introing today. Ethan's feeling a little low. So Ethan's going to sit there and kick back, and I'm going to do all the talking. I'm sorry. Well, these levels are low. How we doing? Fine. That's a little bit better. I like that better. I didn't adjust my microphone at all.
That's all good. Thank you for that introduction, Jason. I appreciate that.
Sure thing, buddy.
How you guys doing? Good morning. Even though I've almost consistently uploaded these at 10:30 at night for the past 6 episodes.
Well, you know, when I was working night shift as a paramedic, we'd always say good morning to each other.
Okay.
Morning.
Okay.
You know,
Nice.
to the crew that was leaving. Good morning.
10 p.m. Good morning. Die, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, go to heck.
Take a hike.
They're like, yeah, have fun. It's been awful all day.
Yeah, kick rocks, dude. Yeah.
Well, it was. You'd come in. It was kind of a little bit. There's a lot of superstition in the paramedic and medicine world. Period.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Like to the point where you would literally get nurses and everybody in the ER angry with you if you walked in and said, "Wow, it's quiet in here." If you want to make an ER nurse furious, especially an old one, pick an old haggard-looking one and be like, "Sure, it's quiet around here." She'll murder you.
Is that like a pre-death thing?
You'll be. No, it means it's going to get busy. Sorry. I just assumed you knew. So it means the opposite will soon happen. All of a sudden, the radio of the charge nurse will light up and paramedics will start dumping reports. Hey, we're coming in code 3. We have a heart attack. You know, we'll see you in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to call earlier. Things have been really hectic. We're right around the corner. We're pulling in right now. You know, and you know, it was you'd feel awful. I'd be like riding along. Things have been crazy. Haven't had a chance to get a radio report in because literally everything else needed to be done.
Yeah.
And it wasn't done. So you're just grab and go with this person. You're like, we need to get this person to the hospital now.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want them on our hands anymore.
Yeah.
Let them die on the bed, not the gurney.
Yeah.
That was your goal, is to make sure they didn't die on your gurney. Just stabilize and transport.
Listen.
Ooh. But you would look up, all of a sudden I'd like glance out the front because we had a little walk through, right? A tiny little peek hole in our ambulances where you could see out the front windshield. I'd look at him and be like, see the light of the intersection next to the hospital. Like, oh no. St. Vincent from Metro West. Code 3 report. Don't even wait for a response. I'm sorry, we're coming in. We're here now. Get the crash cart ready. It's bad.
It's really bad.
It's really bad.
He doesn't have a head.
I can't get a blood pressure. He's still alive, but I can't find it. There were times when sometimes I was just holding off long enough to get a set of vital signs because they would be like, "What's the blood pressure?" And you're like, "Ah." Not nil because he's talking to me, but he doesn't look good. He's super pale and sweaty. His eyes kind of roll back occasionally. That kind of blood pressure. But it's too loud in here for me to hear it.
What's the number you assign to eyes rolling back in his head?
Yeah, exactly. Whatever that is. 30 over palp, maybe.
Yeah. That's funny, dude.
So those were the funny moments afterwards.
That is good. That is funny.
Some of the cool moments, though, were like the teamwork. If you had a good partner.
Yeah.
Some of the times I look back on with fondness, some of the things I miss about it were the teamwork.
Yeah.
With a good partner. There's a guy I'm still in contact with. His name's Ralph. But he was there was one time where I was driving and he had the patient in the back and it was a pregnant woman. And he was checking blood pressures. Everything was fine. We were driving code 1, which is normal driving, no lights or sirens.
Okay.
Code 3 is lights and sirens.
Okay.
And he had already given his HERE report, so the radio report to the hospital, so they were expecting us already. But that intersection right before the hospital, he was like checking the blood pressure, and I could tell just from watching him in the rearview mirror that he was like onto something, or like he was getting a little worried about something.
Yeah.
And he found her blood pressures were different on both of the arms, which is potentially not good.
Okay.
And all he did, I saw him, he moved to the other side and checked the blood pressure on the other arm. He was double checking it manually. The monitor had given him something that put his hackles up.
Yeah.
And so he's double checking, but I was watching him and I had my finger, like, I had my hand on the dial for the siren. And then he just glances up, like with the stethoscope still in his ears, and goes like this with two fingers and like
hurry,
points,
go.
Just one calm like that. I'm like, blast through the intersection. I think I even got on the radio and was like, "Hey, we're up into code 3. See you in 2 minutes."
Was that lady okay?
I think so. Yeah, it
That's
turned out
good.
to be fine. Well, I mean, we don't always know. That was the awful part, is you didn't always get follow up.
Oh, dang. Yeah, that must have really
You would
sucked.
have, if you could check back, like sometimes we'd check in with patients, check in with the nurses at the station, if we went back to that ER that day.
Yeah.
And we could submit a request for a follow-up. We could submit a request for the follow-up
And then they would
through our company,
Yeah.
and then they would like email and we would get like a report back.
Okay.
Sometimes
Okay.
it kind of got lost sometimes.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just never knew.
Yeah. That's sad.
It was, and it was a real. I don't know if this is common for all systems, but I thought that was maybe one of the biggest shortcomings, and I think it revolved a lot around HIPAA, is they didn't want to be transferring patient information willy nilly everywhere.
Right.
A lot of hands that it's going through when you're supposed to protect it, and if it got out, especially like with a patient's name attached to it, that's a very bad thing. Potentially big lawsuits can happen. So I understand why it was locked down.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're creating, like, all the emergency personnel don't know how effective their measures were.
Right.
They can't learn from it. If they're like, the best thing you could do is like talk to the doctor and be like, this is what we found. This is what I did.
Yeah.
Was that good? Is that what you would have done with my skill level and equipment available?
Right.
Like, should I have stayed and played longer on scene to stabilize, or was it a good idea to just rush here? And most of the time, the doctors were cool. The doctors you wanted to talk to anyway.
Yeah.
You know, you'd be, they'd be like, oh, yeah, it seems reasonable,
Yeah.
So as long as it seemed reasonable to try that, then you weren't really in trouble.
Yeah.
If something went really south, then they'd look into it and maybe you'd get a talking to. But more, it was usually not, if you had a line of logic that you were following and you were following protocols and didn't veer way off, it was not a big deal. It's like there's no perfect world in which it's like the protocols change every year too because of what they find.
Right.
So that's why the joke is like they call it practicing medicine for a reason, because you're constantly practicing.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you ever, like, do paramedics ever, like, stitch stuff up?
No,
No?
no stitching. It's
How
just
do you
bandaging.
You just try to stop the bleeding, like pack a wound and...
No, we don't pack a wound. If it was a terrible, like, we would put pressure on was the first step. So put pressure on it, and tourniquet was like the last step. Like, I never in 8 years put a tourniquet on.
Oh,
That's how rare that was.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
You just... What if somebody has, like, a really serious, very heavily bleeding wound, like, to their torso? What do you do?
Put pressure on it.
Okay. You just keep... Does
Yeah,
that
I mean-
actually help a lot? Like, if you put a lot of pressure on a wound
Well, putting
like that?
pressure would help compress, the veins and arteries that are bleeding and help them seal off. So at least it would slow the flow of blood out of the vessels
Okay.
and give the body time to seal off like it naturally does.
Okay. How do they do, like... So,
Arteries, when they get severed, are supposed to spasm and kind of like spasm closed. The muscles,
okay.
I'm forgetting all my anatomy and physiology, but yeah, the smooth muscle, I think, in the wall of the artery spasms closed,
Okay.
or at least down some to titrate the amount of blood that's flowing out of it.
Okay.
Obviously, with a large artery, like your aortic artery that comes straight off your heart and goes down your abdomen, if that severs unless you're on the OR table, like, you're dead.
Yeah.
It's just too much.
Yeah, you
The
die in,
body
like,
can't.
seconds, don't you?
Minutes anyway. Yeah.
That must suck.
So, yeah, aortic dissection, which is where the aorta would split open,
Yeah.
like that was the only way to save those people would be if you caught it early enough. And that was actually, their blood pressures would register differently on both sides of their body.
Okay.
And I never quite understood or got a clear explanation of why that was. But just that, like, that's the main flow of blood that everything else branches off of the aorta. So if
Right.
it splits, like nothing else is getting pressure properly.
Right.
So when your arteries are, this is where you get hemorrhagic strokes too, as an artery that has swollen, an aneurysm. So if you ever see a garden hose that is swollen in a place, like a little bulge out,
Yeah.
that's what an aneurysm is.
Right.
And then, so it'll maintain for a while, and they can go in, preventative is the way to get it.
Yeah.
You want to go in preventatively, and I can't remember if they put a sleeve around it basically to like tamp it down and add a layer of wall to it, more or less,
Yeah.
to keep it from pushing out anymore and bursting over time. But if you didn't catch those people, yeah, they would look awful. So it's not good.
Must have been a heavy job, bro.
Sometimes. I mean, again, you didn't... this is kind of where faith played a big part for me in not letting it be such a burden.
Yeah.
Because the way I dealt with it was I'm ultimately not in control. This plays back to our, was it last episode or a couple episodes ago
think it
where
was
we were talking about
last episode.
control?
Yeah.
I ultimately was not in control.
Right. Right.
Which did not mean you had to let this... I had to make sure not to get too lax about it. I mean, like, whatever, God's got it, and just, you know...
If he dies, he dies.
He dies, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, paramedics often get jaded like that as a way of coping. Dark humor,
Right, yeah.
black humor is a big part of it.
Not a surprise, dude.
Yeah, not a surprise. But that was how I ultimately dealt with it. Was just that you can't ultimately control the outcome.
Right.
You can't hold yourself responsible for it. Unless you were, I mean, I should say there is responsibility when you are negligent
Right.
or when you are lazy and do not know your job the way you should.
Right.
If you flat out have no idea what the protocols are and whatnot. But there's also cases like people do not present in this picture perfect way. I remember in paramedic school, I had that impression. It's like, wow, if I just memorize all of these different signs and symptoms of this disease or this, this problem with somebody, then I'll know and then I can treat it.
Right.
It's like maybe they're presented with one out of those. You know? And you saw this with COVID too. It's like, what are the symptoms of COVID? It went from like fever and cough to like, well, it could be stomach stuff too. You could have diarrhea. You could have vomiting. Could have shortness of breath. Maybe you're not short of breath. Maybe you're
Maybe you have extra breath.
maybe you have extra breath. Yeah, I saw people with their oxygen saturation. Obviously, the ideal oxygen saturation is to be 100%.
Right.
That means all the hemoglobin in your blood, in your red blood cells, is bound to an oxygen.
Yeah.
That's what 100% would be.
Okay.
And it goes anywhere down from, like 95 on up. 95 to 100 is fine. And below that, below 94, you'd start giving like little amounts of oxygen to help bump it up and things. People who are smokers and whatnot would be chronically lower than that, just depending on how beat up their lungs are. And people who are sick, with phlegm and stuff like that in their lungs, that they would have lower oxygen saturation as well. But with COVID, that was so weird. I would see people who were fine. They would look fine. They didn't present as a shortness of breath or a breathing problem kind of person.
Yeah.
And you'd put the pulse oximeter on them to check their oxygen saturation, and it's like 70%. And you're like, what? Is this broken? You're like, surely this machine is broken. Because the other thing we always said was, we were taught, treat the patient, not the monitor. Because you can just get blinders on and you're looking at the monitor and you're like, this thing is saying they're dying.
Right.
And then you notice that they're just tapping their foot and it's moving the cords for the ECG, and it's making it look like they have some horrible heart rhythm.
Yeah.
You'll look at the monitor, you're like, oh my goodness, they're in ventricular tachycardia. And then you're like, they're fine though. They should look bad. And you're like, oh, they're like tapping their finger on the nervously on the wires, and it's causing interference. The monitor's going crazy, and you're like, yeah, it's fine.
That's funny. Well, hello everybody. That's not how we intended to start this episode.
No, we started off talking about VBS.
That's true.
Vacation Bible School. We just
that was
ended
gonna be
yesterday.
that was going to be a fun, light conversation. We started and then we started with what's it like to watch someone die.
Yeah, wow, we're 15 minutes in.
That's good though. I am sick, everyone. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice. I've been sick all week. Sick as a dog, dude. I got hit with the. I got sick, and we lost power for several days because of the storms.
Did? Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
so we were at my parents' house. I just
Okay.
had a week deleted, just gone, completely erased. No progress, no writing, no working out, no
Just
nothing.
survival.
Yeah, just pure, just make it day by day. And a lot of that making it day by day was just laying on my parents' couch, staring at the ceiling, just being like, I don't like how I feel. So, all good though. We keep trudging along, baby.
Yeah.
You grind it out. We did get some good stuff, but we were talking about Vacation Bible School before we started recording. I did the skits this week, and
I'm quite jealous.
well,
Next
let's do
year-
them. Yeah, you should
next
come do
year
them
I
next
wanna join.
Yeah, do them with
We
me
could
next
have
year.
a really fun duo.
Yeah. We'd have a great time. Yes, because I had Chris with me,
Yeah.
and that was not. It's obvious. You're like, oh, this is not Chris's skill set. This is not what he's best at. Because that's one point in the skit where I.
You mean it rising to the level of energy that you do?
Yes, yeah, because it was like I was like screaming, like
Yeah, I heard.
like scream.
I think people had to take small children out.
Did they take kids out?
My wife said that Rachel carried Corinne out.
That's funny.
And I was like, Ethan probably would not have he probably would have been amused by it rather than like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Chris did tell me that after the first day, he was like, Bethany said down one level with the yelling. And I was like, all right, I'll bring it down one level. And then I got kind of self-conscious about it, so it wasn't like, I don't know, I think I could have done the whole thing better. I wish I would have had more time to actually write the skits out.
Okay.
As opposed to just have the character. But it was good. It was a lot of fun. I think the kids liked it. I made a...
Our kids thought it was hilarious.
Okay, good. Good.
Mr. Ethan. Wow, that was close.
Did it.
Mr. Ethan. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, they were...
I was like, was he loud? And they're like, yeah, he was loud. Yeah, they loved it.
One of the moms that buys Emily's bread saw her at some point in the middle of the week to get some bread or something. I don't remember how the conversation happened, but she was telling her about the skits, and she was like, "My kids love it. They think it's so funny," and they were talking about it forever. And then one of them at the end goes, "I hope he's not like that loud at home."
Just all the time.
Yeah.
Did you pass the salt?
And Emily was like, sometimes he is. On a Saturday morning, he'll take a cold shower and scream at the top of his lungs. Yeah, Emily's so quiet, dude. I'm so loud. I do, in our house, yell at the top of my lungs. Like, Abigail and I will sit and go, ah! Abigail thinks it's so funny, dude. And I'll come in sometimes and be like, Abigail, can you yell? And she'll go, ah! Let it rip. It's pretty good.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and then I'll take a cold shower on Saturday mornings to wake up.
Yeah.
Because I got to get I got to leave. It's one thing to wake up early and then just walk 7 seconds to my office. Mm-hmm. It's another thing entirely to get in my truck and drive over here. So I take a cold shower and I go, well, I won't say what I say, but I just yell very loudly, and then Abigail will come into the bathroom and start yelling it with me, and so
that's adorable.
Yeah, so I'm loud at the house, but the reason why we thought it would be funny, or why I thought it would, whatever, the reason why we were going to tell that story when we first started recording was because I was laughing at myself because you were saying that my reputation had expanded.
Like tenfold.
Yeah.
Like everyone at church who didn't know you now is like, do you know Ethan so-and-so?
Yeah. And I was talking about how
I was like, yeah, I did. Somebody asked, I think Will, who just got hired on with us.
Okay.
So he works with Jesse and I now for like the last 3 weeks now.
Okay.
Anyway, I think he's like, do you know Ethan? I was like, yeah. I like let it go casual.
Yeah, I know a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I've met him. Go ahead, say what you're gonna say. I want you to be unfiltered in this. I want to know your undiluted opinion
I'm
of
gonna
him.
bully Ethan later with everything you say.
Yeah, I was very amused.
Yeah, that's funny.
I was like, was like being a fly on the wall a little bit.
That's good. I was making fun of myself because when you said that, I kind of realized that at some point this week, and dude, I was euphoric. I was about to pass out. The story I was going to say is,
You're like you were made to be a rock star, basically.
dude, it's bad. It's really not good.
I know, and that's yeah.
I gotta. You don't want to. We'll get into the topic in a second, but here's a good point of advice. You need to orient your desires. God gave you the desires you have, and so you need to orient them so that they are, help further His kingdom. So if you like, for example, I'm obsessed with Porsches. I want a Ford Excursion. Like, I love them. I like expensive things. I was raised in a semi-wealthy family. I like the finer things in life, and so I want them, and so I try to make sure that my pursuit of material gain is done in such a way that it is allowing me opportunities to fulfill the Great Commission, or further God's mission in some way. So, and an example of that is VBS. I really like attention. I like people knowing who I am. I like when people are paying attention to me and telling me I'm doing a good job, laughing at my jokes. And so it's very rewarding for me. Mm-hmm. I don't need to be paid or incentivized in any way other than just the opportunity to get in front of the kids and make a bunch of jokes and make VBS more fun.
Be a superstar for the kids.
Right. Yeah. And that's a good, you should not, don't
make all those other dads jealous that their kids don't laugh at them this much.
Right, exactly, dude. Don't you wish you were a funny dad?
Like me?
Yeah.
Don't you wish your husband was funny like me?
Yeah. So you should, if you have desires for things, I mean, as long as the thing isn't being a homosexual or something, like some dude's butt, like if your desire isn't for that, as long as it's for something that isn't inherently sinful, you shouldn't feel ashamed about that desire. You should orient it correctly so that it's whatever. So take what I'm saying here with a grain of salt, but it is I do have to regulate it because the one time in Denton when I was in college, I introduced myself to somebody at a house party, and he goes, "Yeah, I know who you are." I almost passed out, dude. It felt so good. I was like, "Oh man, I gotta get out. I gotta go. I gotta leave."
That's it for me.
Yeah, I don't even need. That's it. I don't even need to drink. This is great. I'm off this high all night.
Yeah.
So, VBS was a lot of fun. I did a character called Bobby Bulking Season. Anybody listening to this, you can take it. Super easy character. You just get a do-rag, some kind of American themed shirt. The one I found at Walmart this time was like a Chevrolet, exploding through a brick wall, and it said Chevy across it.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Bet,
that's
perfect.
Me.
That's exactly
that's
what
Bobby.
I need. That's Bobby.
That's Bobby, baby."
And then I got some AC/DC pajama pants. And
I heard about the AC/DC clothes. I think Emily was trying to describe your get-up.
Yeah. At one point, I ripped my sleeves off.
I heard one of them didn't come off, and you were openly you just ripped it, right?
Yeah.
It sounded like you totally just ripped it. You did you're like, I don't know why this one's isn't coming off. I even pre-cut these.
Yeah. I was like, I don't know why this one's not coming. I can't do the voice without screaming, so I don't. It's hard to.
The voice is screaming.
Yeah, the voice is literally just.
It's just Ethan screaming.
Yeah, I kind of do you go down deeper into your throat. It's hard. I had to take. Thursday, I didn't even come to church and do the skit.
Yeah, I know you did a recording.
Yeah, because I couldn't do the voice.
Emily said she said it was really good though.
Yeah,
the background sounded like you were in some sort of flea market.
Yeah,
almost
in
with
Chile.
all the background sound.
And I edited in donkey noises and screaming at a donkey in bad Spanish. Yeah. Por favor. Yeah. I can't do the voice, so it's not even worth quoting. But it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I tried to rip. That's what I was saying. I tried to rip the sleeves off, and one of them didn't come off, and I cut them the way if you're gonna rip clothes while performing, you need to either make sure that you buy clothes that are specifically made to be ripped, so you can rip them.
What a first world thing.
Right.
These clothes are made to be ripped off in performance.
Exactly. Yeah. Or
everyone in Africa's like, what?
Yeah. Why would you do that?
Why would you? It's a perfectly good shirt.
Yeah.
It's not even the losing NFL team from last year.
Right.
It's a Super Bowl.
It's a perfectly good polo shirt with the gigantic polo logo on it. That's like half the size of the shirt. Why would you rip it? That's a joke about that's a dig at Indian people wearing weird polo Ralph Lauren shirts. Yeah, so I cut the sleeves, and one of them didn't come off all the way yet. So I was like, I don't even know. I pre-cut this. I don't know why it's not coming off. Yeah, so it was fun. It was a good time. We should definitely do it together next year, both of us.
I'd be down. Well,
yeah.
The problem is work.
Oh yeah,
getting off on time.
Yeah. Well, maybe because it's.
So we'll see.
Your boss goes to our church, maybe he'll make it
He possibly could.
Yeah.
Just depends on what's going on. Anyway, we'll figure it out.
All right, dude. A little late on today's topic.
Yeah, 15 minutes over. I apologize.
Oh. Hold on. I got to do this. I've got show notes today.
Ooh.
So this is...
You're not trying to access the internet on that, are you?
No.
Okay.
I've got it here.
Look at you planning ahead.
Yes.
Knowing your situation.
So, this is something I want everyone to know. So the global warming phenomenon. Okay, I'll touch on this quick. The ocean is getting hotter. That's not up for debate.
Okay.
That's a measurable, empirical, factual thing.
I'm all right with it.
Yeah, me too. To what extent humans are affecting that, that's kind of what the question is. One of the things that is very clear, though, is that post-industrialization, a society's carbon footprint reduces very significantly. So
the carbon footprint reduces after industrial?
Right? So it spikes obviously exponentially during their industrial revolution. Post-industrial revolution, things start to go.
Is that after all the infrastructure is in place?
Right.
Is that the idea?
Well,
at first they're just...
The technology gets more efficient.
Oh, okay.
So engines get more efficient, and then now, in the past, over the past decade, solar has been, it doesn't work because the cells, the solar cells that are actually in the panels have to be replaced before they generate enough energy to pay for themselves. Right. That's changing. If it hasn't already changed yet, it is changing. We're getting solid state batteries are about to come out. There's a lot of stuff that's coming out that's going to make getting energy from the giant fusion reactor we have in space, very close to our planet. That's going to be a lot more efficient.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
So solar's not necessarily a worthless technology. It's just in its growth stage.
Right. Exactly. We just haven't made it efficient enough. So
see, I thought I had heard somewhere, and I never looked into it to back it up, but I had heard that they had said this is only as efficient as you can possibly make this technology.
Yeah, I don't think that that's true.
Okay.
Because there's
and obviously storage is a big part of it.
Right, storage is a huge part of it.
Storing, whether or not you lose it, whether or not you have to replace the batteries at a certain point, and then recycling an acid, whatever.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff I don't understand, but obviously, if your equipment is breaking down and you have to do something with it, and maybe that's just thrown away in a junkyard because you can't reuse any of the components, that's a problem.
Right.
That's the problem with the wind turbines.
Right.
Is they're just trash
afterwards. Wind turbines also, I don't think they'll ever be.
Because they have to be kick-started to even move. The wind won't start them. They're so big and heavy.
Right.
So you have to use petroleum-based energy or electricity to kick-start them so they'll spin.
Yeah.
And the wind will keep picking them up. Apparently, though, they have to feather them. They can't spin. I just learned this yesterday at lunch with Jesse's brother. Was on a round table with energy producing people.
Yeah.
And they had a round table discussion with a bunch of people in the oil industry and whatnot. And apparently, energy production off of solar and wind is not good. They get knocked down really fast too.
Yeah.
In storms like the Snowmageddon, knocked out tons of it.
Yeah, they kill billions of birds every year. It's crazy.
Really?
Yeah.
Those wind turbines are often desert areas.
The birds. Well, if you not in Texas, like between us and Waco, there's hundreds of hectares of these things.
I'm just surprised birds are flying around over there.
They're not anymore. They're all dead.
Well, I mean, just there's not trees to light in, so I'm just surprised birds are there at all.
Yeah. Yeah. They kill a lot of birds every year. But here, the point that I'm ultimately trying to make is that per unit of labor, we get industrialization exponentially increases the productivity per unit of labor. So however you want to measure that. We'll just, for the simplicity's sake, we'll say hours of a human being working. So per hour of one human being working, industrialization and then digitization, like the technological revolution, these things are exponential in their return of productivity. So exponential means that they double every time they increase. So the global warming thing is just a tool I'm using to make a point, which is that technology will ultimately facilitate a world that somebody who is anti-technology, I think, would agree with very much, because you can, like, the small farms are coming back, right? I mean, at this point, small farms are almost entirely, the only reason that they're not viable at this point is because of regulation. And
right,
a new company just figured out how to create plants that can take 100% of the genetic code from both of their parents. So you can create new species of wheat and potatoes and stuff that are like triple as efficient. But it's a whole thing. So like they're cheaper, they take less fertilizer, they're more drought resistant, and they grow better, larger quantities. So it's easier to be a small farmer producing more food. And productivity, increases in productivity lead to decentralization. Like we just...
Right, so you don't need to have everything in one place.
Exactly.
In order to make the economy of scale is downplayed, is what you're saying?
Yes.
So you don't have to get bigger to stay in the game.
Right.
Necessarily.
Right. And the only thing, so there's I don't remember whose quote this is, but it's your margin is my opportunity. So if you have a monopoly like Google or something, and they're making $1 trillion every year in cash, like they're over their operating expenses. Their
right.
EBITDA is ridiculous. What that indicates is that that's opportunity for everyone else to compete that margin away from you. So they're going to come in, undercut you with new technology. They can do it faster, cheaper, more efficiently, whatever, and get that margin away from you and capture it themselves. The only way that monopolies actually have to protect themselves after a certain period of time, after innovation starts to compete away their margin, monopolies have to appeal to the government to regulate things away. And that's why, like today...
Or bully and buy up the smaller businesses before they...
But even then, that will... Because you will get like homicidally obsessed young men who are like, I'm not selling
out.
Right. And so antitrust laws in the U.S. are almost never used to break up actual monopolies. They're almost always used to stop people that would compete with the monopolies. So the monopolies lobbied the government to use antitrust laws to disassemble and break apart companies that would otherwise compete with them. So
this happened with the micropub movement in the UK.
Yeah,
became possible because of law changes that enabled small pubs literally run by the owner and maybe his family,
right,
and a couple of friends, as opposed to the big breweries, like whatever the UK's version of Budweiser is,
right,
like those guys.
Yeah, and so the point that I'm trying to make here is that it's actually like decentralization in productivity that is the natural state of a free market. It actually takes the government coming in and interceding on the behalf of people who already have the slight majority in power,
right,
to maintain that. Eventually, the other foot, the other shoe drops, and power structures break apart, and that power is divided more evenly amongst whatever. So
good. Well, I certainly hope so.
Yeah. And I think that's the track we're on. Eventually, the government won't be able to pay its bills, and when that occurs, it's the largest navy on the planet will not be protecting Amazon anymore, and so they won't be able to ship. They won't be able to ship you mangoes from Madagascar in a day because they won't be able to put giant ships to the ocean without them getting hijacked by pirates.
Right.
But the point that I wanted to make ultimately,
the ultimate
point was that if you are if you want to live in a world where things are more agrarian or rural, that is actually going to become more possible with the increase in technology. And I have some stats for you. So the washing machine that our wives use to clean our clothes saves women 10 years over the course of their domestic life in time. 10 years, a decade of time is saved by a washing machine. The dishwasher saves women 2.5 years of time over the life of a domestic career. So we're at 12 and a half years saved by two machines that are you can get for $200. The invention of antibiotics increased the average life expectancy from 48 to 78. They decreased the infant mortality rate by infectious disease from 1 in 20 to 3 in 1,000. Think about how many people are saved by antibiotics. And you might say, well, the infant mortality rate reducing is what increases life expectancy. And I would say, yeah, duh. Are you arguing that it's okay that kids die? Like what? That's an argument I see all the time. Well, modern medicine, it hasn't actually increased the length of a human life. It's just decreased infant mortality. Okay. That sounds sick. Why are you I would hate it if I had of the I'm running 33% chance that one of my kids is going to die of getting sick. Like
all those big families back in those days had a dead child or two.
Yeah, it would ruin my life if one of my kids died.
Well, then it didn't, because that was just how it was.
Right, but they had to adapt.
I'm saying that was the norm.
Right.
So it wasn't as horrifying. It was sad.
Right.
But I'm saying you acclimate to the situation you're in. The water the fish is in he doesn't notice.
Right.
Just like this is the temperature.
Right.
I don't even know.
Yeah, but think about the emotional energy freed up by not having to mourn the loss of a child. I mean, I think you're right. I think you are right. Like it obviously impacted them less than it would today.
Right. Because it's so unusual today.
Right.
It would be horrifyingly tragic because it's so rare.
Right. Since its inception, AC has prevented 2.1 million deaths in less than 100 years in the U.S. This is a quote from Stephen Johnson.
Which is... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'll hold it.
Almost immediately, air conditioning triggered the largest migration of human beings in the history of the United States, increasing the population of states like Texas by a factor of 5 in a single generation. And this is a quote from me. Talk about making farming possible. Like, think about the amount of work you can now do during the summer, the amount of farming hours you can participate in the heat, because you can retreat to AC instead of having to worry about overheating, instead of having to worry about the lack of cleanliness. Like, you can get into a clean AC environment super quickly. So you can, the workable hours during the year of being outside is, I don't know if it's exponentially increased, but it's certainly increased. Like, you can work later into the day. So you can wake up at the same time you would if you didn't have AC. You can work later in the day because you can allow yourself to get hotter, because if you overheat, you're not gambling with your life, because you can just walk inside and go into the refrigerator, get a nice cold glass of water, and sit down underneath the fan in an AC environment and cool off. So the workable hours has increased significantly. Then I just said planes.
Don't know what that was about.
Just airplanes.
Oh, travel?
Yes.
Like connectivity?
Yes. So at the time of the Industrial Revolution, real wages did not increase for agricultural workers. However, in England, real wages doubled by 1860s. The Industrial Revolution increased the real wages of agricultural workers and their standards of living. The percentage of American labor force in agriculture at the beginning of the 19th century was 83%. So 83% of the entire American population worked to produce food at the beginning of the 19th century. By the end of it, by the 1860s, 53% of the population worked in agriculture. So almost half of all the human labor hours that had to be used to produce food were now freed up to go do other things. So for wheat, work hours per acre. So the work hours per acre at the beginning of the 1800s was 56 work hours per acre to yield 15 bushels. I don't know what that. So a standard unit of 100 pounds of wheat. So 1,500 pounds of wheat could be produced. I don't know if that's the actual number. I'm just saying that.
Let's just say 15 bushels.
Yeah, 15 bushels of wheat could be produced off of 1 acre that took 56 hours to work. In 1970, so 170 years later, work hours per acre, 3. The yield per acre doubled, 31 bushels per acre.
What year was this?
This is 170 years later, so 1800s, and then 170 years later, 1970s.
Okay.
Cotton, work hours per acre, 185. Yield per acre, 147. That's in the 1800s. In 1970, work hours per acre, 24. Yield per acre, 438. Almost quadruple. No, sorry, almost 4 times. Yes, that's quadruple. Almost 4 times the yield. Hold on. The literacy rates actually weren't affected by the Industrial Revolution. Okay, cool. Those are my show notes.
That's very interesting.
Yes.
It's also good for me to be on this podcast with you.
Okay, that's good.
Because my natural disposition is more anti-technology, I suppose.
Yeah.
Of a certain level. And maybe I should quantify that. I think maybe my viewpoint is changing to be somewhat Amish, because the Amish, I believe, I could be wrong in this, but I believe they're not anti-technology. They are anti-too fast of an adoption of technology.
Yeah.
They don't want to be caught up. Maybe I should just say this for myself, but largely inspired by what I think the Amish are doing.
Yeah.
Because they will, I believe they adopt technologies, but much later than everybody else does, after they've had time to see and analyze and say, is this going to actually benefit us long term? And how do we implement it wisely so that we're not caught up in the latest thing and moving so fast that we can't even keep up with the running pace that we're...
Yeah.
Because that's what I see. Any piece of technology you buy is so quickly outdated that it's not even supported anymore, which is very frustrating.
Very frustrating, yeah.
Yeah, it's like in air conditioning, things are being cranked out so fast, it's like you don't have a chance to perfect what you've got because you're like, well, the next thing, what if we make it better?
Right.
It's like, how about you make the thing you had that was really good just work?
Right.
And support it so the people who fix it can actually fix it instead of just replacing it and causing all this trash.
Right.
That's my frustration with the breakneck pace of technology.
Yeah.
And so I guess what I would be curious about is is this just a breakneck pace that's going to level off at some point? Maybe this is, I think we've talked about this before, there's that wall, the ceiling that God put in where you can only get so efficient.
Right.
We can't just become gods and
we'll never reach 100% efficiency.
Right.
Right.
And so I find this on our own little family farm here. Obviously, I'm trying to do things as efficiently as possible.
Right.
So I'm not attempting to do things. Well, maybe it would look to an outsider maybe like I am trying to do things in the least efficient way possible. because I have an actual scythe.
Yeah, as an outsider, sometimes
it does look like that.
Does.
Why are you not using a tractor?
Why are you making it harder on yourself? Just go buy the thing with an engine.
Yeah. And the reason is because sometimes the engine breaks down and leaves you in the lurch.
Certainly.
And it's harder to fix.
Yeah. Right. So
And there's-
sometimes
so
it
there's
is
more-
actually more efficient.
Right. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Right.
I want the tools that last the longest, that benefit me the most, that have the least input, right? I'm looking
Right.
for the least amount of input,
Right.
which is efficiency.
Right.
So when I look at a tractor, I don't want a payment on a $30,000 tractor that's never going to pay off for my level of
Right.
farming here.
Right.
And adds a level of risk to my children, because heavy equipment is a big killer or mutilator of farm kids.
Okay. Yeah.
There's the ranch that we bought our sheep from. The guy who runs it, his dad lost a leg as an 8-year-old or something as a tractor accident.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Okay.
Those things, you won't even feel yourself backing over a child.
Right.
They're so heavy.
Yeah.
It's you would just crush them and be like, oh, there's my child dead,
Right.
which horrifies me. So I'm like, I'm not bringing a tractor on here. There will be no tractor here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But
so that's
also-
why I use so many hand tools. It's where's the stuff that I can keep really good track of and don't have to worry so much? It's bad enough swinging a scythe and hoping that your kid hasn't wandered quietly up behind you.
You just hit
'Cause
them.
I'll get, yeah. What are you doing? You don't walk up behind. So training them to not walk up behind anybody using a tool at all is a part of what I'm doing here.
Yeah,
It's you have to be wise.
Yeah.
Look around. What is Dad doing?
Yeah.
Should you be sneaking up behind him to give him a hug around the knees when he's swinging a machete? No.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other part of it is that I don't. So, the whole thing about air conditioning, antibiotics, and all that, I think I have to admit that it is a net win.
Sure. Yeah.
But my qualification is, and this is, so there's a learning curve with this, right? Antibiotics were used, they were revolutionary, and penicillin was life-saving for tons of kids.
Right.
Was it diphtheria?
I don't know.
I don't remember. I'm trying to remember the cartoon movie Balto. Did you ever see that?
I don't know.
Your daughter will love it. So get the movie Balto. It's about a half wolf, half dog, Balto, who leads a sled dog team
I remember what you're talking about. Yep, I'm there.
on a dangerous trip to get antibiotics to a remote town in Anchorage, Alaska, I think,
Yeah.
to save a bunch of kids who are sick with a case of, I think it was diphtheria.
Okay. Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
So kids were dying. This dog was able to get this dog was credited with being a large part why this shipment got through on a sled dog team
Yeah.
to save a bunch of kids. So I'm not disputing that that's good. However, one of the negative side effects of that is the overuse of antibiotics or the misuse of them. If you do not take your full course of antibiotics, if you're given a 7-day regimen, 5-day regimen of an antibiotic and you take 3 days of it because you're like, I feel better on day 3, I'm going to stop taking this medicine that's giving me diarrhea,
Right.
which reasonably you would.
Right.
But the problem is that you've then left the strongest of those bacteria alive, and then they replicate and they become harder to kill.
Right.
So that antibiotic becomes useless and they have to develop stronger and stronger antibiotics or newer ones to kill the quote-unquote superbugs.
Right.
Like MRSA. It's like methylococcus resistant or anyway, MRSA, MRSA, is a superbug that is a big killer, especially of older people, because it's resistant to so many antibiotics that we have.
Yeah.
So that's and again, maybe that, and I don't know the numbers, so maybe that number of people it's killing is not even to be compared with the number that antibiotics have saved.
Sure.
But coming from the medicine community, it was very frustrating.
Right.
Just the lack of education around antibiotics was frustrating. It's a pet peeve of mine, I guess.
Yeah.
But obviously, I'm very grateful that if my kid gets truly sick, that I can take them to a hospital and there's a reasonable chance that they're going to be saved by modern medicine.
Right.
So I'm not anti-modern medicine. I use it very sparingly, though.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to use it in the most efficient way, quote unquote, efficient way possible by not using it all the time.
Right.
Every time my kid has a cough, I don't take him in.
Right. You just
Like,
give
I
them
take 'em in-
elderberry, some essential oils.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Give them supplements, boost their immune system, let them go play in the dirt,
Right. Yeah.
and
Get them in the sun.
get them in the sun.
Don't get them vaccinated.
Yeah, see, that's a whole So that's a whole other thing of like, is that progress or not?
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard to find true answers. How do you know what a true answer is? Because all the stats are controlled by giant agencies that have an agenda.
Yeah.
And so obviously they want it to look as good as possible, and maybe it is. But if there's anything negative about it, the naysayers are going to be pushed aside and say, no, this is progress. You need to shut up. You are spreading disinformation.
Right.
It's like, well, I think those people truly just they've been harmed in some way. And if they're not being heard, they think that the whole thing is bad. And maybe it is.
Maybe it is. So, yeah, I mean, I think so. I think we've been talking about our topic this whole time, actually, because our topic today was going to be broadening your horizons, opening up your perspective. And I think the point you were going to make when you said being on this podcast has been good for you was that.
How about that? You're tying it in. I was going to say it was going to be a different episode.
Nope, I'm tying it in.
I was preparing to ask you if you wanted to do a doubleheader today.
I can do a doubleheader if you want.
Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, but yes,
actually,
so that's broadening.
I'm doubleheader.
Broadening. What's that?
I said I'm kind of feeling a doubleheader. I don't know why.
Maybe so.
Yeah. So broadening your
I might have
horizons.
to turn the AC on though.
That's that. You got to be efficient. I think that there is a movement that is totally reasonably disenfranchised with the modern view of technology, with the way that people hold it as almost like a god. And you're right about the
I love science people.
Yes.
Oh, I hate that.
Yes.
The people who treat science like a god, as if it's a process of observation. That's all it is.
Yeah.
You're observing something that was created, and you're acting like it's the god.
Right. And so there are people that are the the Windleberry type people out there, but then there's also, like, the camp I come from is the effective accelerationist people, techno-optimists, which I am a technological optimist. Mm-hmm. I do think that AI and crypto and like all the new technologies that are coming out today are going to steer us out of this pit that we're staring into right now. And so it is good for you and I. It's part of the reason why I asked you to do this with me, is because you and I come from such different camps on this issue, and it informs large parts of how we conduct ourselves in our day-to-day lives, and not least in like our professions. You're a farmer. I'm a tech bro.
It's not my profession.
Well, you know what I mean. Like,
we're desired.
Yeah. Our vocational whatever. You work with your hands no matter what. Like, whether you're coming here and on the farm, or you're in someone's house doing air conditioning. Yep. Like, you're working with your hands. You're working with technology that is pretty well established.
I do have a point I want to make about air conditioning and government regulation, but that'll wait. But go ahead.
But the point that we can make here is that it does expand your perspective. It does expand your sort of ability to view the world as a whole when you're constantly talking with people who have a logically thought out, sincere, intelligent opinion that is different from yours.
Yeah.
And there are things that I'm wrong about, and there are things that Jason's wrong about, and there are things that Jason's right about, and there are things that I'm right about. And the truth is somewhere in the middle, usually. You know what I mean?
Did you say you were right twice?
Did I?
I don't know.
Okay. If I did, I didn't mean to do that. I wasn't.
That would have been funny.
Making a joke. That would have been funny.
Subtle dig.
That would have been funny.
Sometimes Jason's wrong. Sometimes he's right. I'm always right.
I'm always right. Yeah, I should have done that. I hope I did do that.
Let us know, Calvin.
Yeah, let us know, Calvin. Hey, we got 2 pretty consistent listeners now.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
I would say back to the topic at hand, after tying in the whatever the topic for today, back to what we were talking about originally, which is efficiency. I think that, although I'm a techno optimist, I think we are. So when you talk about market efficiency, things that break are not efficient. Mm-hmm. You need to be able to have the effort and capital that was put into producing this thing needs to pay off before it breaks. So planned obsolescence is not a long-term.
It is loathsome to me.
Right. And it is not a long-term strategy. And I think people are realizing that. They are resentful that their iPhone is obsolete in a year. Apple's stock is reducing pretty significantly. People are not buying new iPhones. Apple's having a really hard time getting people to buy new iPhones. And I think that that's a symptom of people realizing that it's just not...
It doesn't do that much different, and it's going to break in a year.
Right. This mammon worship, this like pursuit of the newest thing is not fulfilling. And Jason is right. Technology, it's not... Here, but here's what I would say. If technology was actually advancing as fast as these new products are coming out, we would not be sitting here complaining about the rate at which new products come out.
Right, because I wouldn't have anything negative to say about it. If everything just worked all the time.
Right. If it was actually, or even if it didn't work all the time, but when it did work, it was so valuable that you didn't care.
I don't know if that's possible, because if you got used to it being so valuable and then all of a sudden it's gone, you'd be furious.
Well, I mean, let's imagine if every time you rolled the dice, you made $1,000 when it hit on even numbers. And then every time you rolled the dice, you lost $400 every time it hit on odds. You wouldn't care you wouldn't care.
Oh, gotcha.
You'd keep rolling the dice. You'd roll that dice all day. It's just a matter of the odds are. It's just a matter of you're gonna be up. Yes, you'll hit some bust cycles, but you also hit boom cycles, and then it's just a matter of knowing when to get out of that situation. That's what I mean. Like there is a threshold at which point something is so beneficial that even if it's not operating at 100% capacity all the time, it's still way more beneficial than the previous way of doing it. So if technology was actually advancing at a rate that justified the newest product coming out, you wouldn't care, but it's not, right? And so that's where you hit this, like it's actually inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
It is not more efficient to come out with a new iPhone every year than it is to come out with a new iPhone once every 3 and have actual ingenuity,
meaningful updates,
right, coming to the phone.
So it's just a cash grab to throw one out every year with minor updates or a new color,
right?
And it's now in champagne color,
right? Exactly.
Oh, I've got to have the champagne color.
yeah.
To be like all the other unique people.
Yeah. I gotta make sure everybody can see that my phone has 3 cameras. I don't know what the third one does, but yeah, and then we
really need to give videos. So
when I don't have to worry about getting fired, we'll get cameras up.
Yeah, that's all right.
For sure.
No worries.
The one thing I would say about the Amish point of view, I think, is a good one, because you do want to make technological progress. You certainly don't want to make it too quickly, because you will end up doing more harm to yourself than good. The one thing I would say about that is that the Amish get to take the extreme version of that position because the vast majority of society doesn't take that position. So they get to watch as people adopt all these different technologies, see which ones work and which ones don't, and implement the ones that have a net positive result in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so
you're saying they don't have to do the testing?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
somebody's got to do the testing. Somehow we got to figure out whether or not implementing preservatives in food is actually good, right? Like when they created preservatives in food, which are obviously, like, everybody's realizing now that it may not actually be that like
good for you,
right? But that's a 100-year-long test,
because
how can you tell if it's going to develop chronic disease in people without developing chronic disease in people? It's a dark way to say it, but
no, but it is the only way to.
Yeah, and when preservatives in food came out, I mean, you're talking about a country that is as big as entire continents. You know, the U.S. is as big as Europe, and you're having to feed hundreds of millions of people across a huge space. How are you going to get milk from Idaho to Florida without it spoiling?
Why would you have to?
Because it's you can in certain weathers it's more efficient. They grow a certain grass that's like if the cow eats this grass, it produces a certain milk that has a higher nutrient density and more milk, whatever. And so it's actually more efficient to.
So if you live in Florida, you don't get to drink milk.
That's kind of where we're coming to, right?
You drink sheep milk.
A lot of people are like my family. We've stopped buying vegetables out of season, as opposed to just eating. Like I grew up eating strawberries year round, right?
Yeah.
But now, like at our house, we've accepted that the only way to get processed weird frankenberries is to only eat them when organic berries grow.
Yeah.
And so people are.
And then you realize that they taste way better.
Right, and they taste way better. Yeah.
They're not just red and water.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
This is it looks beautiful, but it's tart.
Yeah, and there's no nutrients.
There's no flavor to this.
There's
No nutrients.
Yeah.
And only the varieties that are shelf stable, which are like a drop in the bucket compared to the varieties that are out there.
Right.
Like the stuff you find in the grocery store. I was just reading in a fruit tree growing book of like the wide variety of like pears that are out there, and you get 3 in the grocery store.
Yeah.
That are shelf stable enough.
Right. So there's
like an adage of farmers that he quotes in there that says like real pears don't stack. It's like they bruise so easily. It's like you'd never be able to take a real pear and put it in boxes and ship it anywhere because it would just be destroyed by the time. Like a good, soft, delicious, sweet pear.
Yeah, certainly.
Is not going to make it to the grocery store and be anything you'd want to buy.
Yeah. And so here's what I'll make this one final point, and then we'll turn over to your thoughts. The global warming thing.
Yeah.
So countries that have an industrial revolution, they spike in their carbon production, their smog production, pollution production, acid
China,
rain. India
right now.
Yeah, and you don't even have to make a broader global warming point. You can just say that during an industrial revolution, the living environments for human beings become pretty terrible, at least in the cities. And but post-industrial revolution, living quality very radically increases past what it was even before the Industrial Revolution, right? So you get the reward later on. And an example of what I'm talking about is because almost half of the labor in the U.S. got freed up, you have people that have free time to do all this other stuff. One of the things that they've done that just happened the last couple of weeks is this technology I talked about earlier, where they were able to use CRISPR gene editing to create plants that can take 100% of their parents' offspring or their parents' genetic code. So before it was 50-50. So it would take 50% from the mom, 50% from the dad, and you had no idea what 50% they would take. So it was just a crapshoot if you're trying to
it was just a long process of selective breeding.
Right, to get a plant that was drought resistant, so that you could grow wheat in a certain area you couldn't before. Now you can just customize it, make it however you want. So you can produce tremendous, you can take a potato that couldn't grow in the desert, can now grow in the desert at twice the load that it could in Idaho, wherever. And so you are creating an environment where people you can't do that with animals, by the way, or people. Obviously you can't, because they'd come out retarded. But with plants, because I guess they're
a lower form of life, it doesn't.
Yeah, they're a lower form of life, so they're.
That just makes me wonder, though, what the effects of that would be, eating those for your whole life, if there's going to be a 100-year process where they're like, oh yeah, you know what happens when you live on those,
and we might.
It's not good for you.
Yeah, it might. But for now, not for now, but you are going to have an environment where it is possible to grow the grass that needs to be grown to produce a certain kind of milk in Florida. So you can grow that grass, you can feed those cows, they can eat it, you can produce that milk. So you don't have to make the milk in Idaho to import it into Florida. So you don't have to put the preservatives in the milk. You don't have to boil it. You can just have raw milk everywhere.
Yeah.
Because you can have the milk production level that you have in wherever you have it. You can have it in Texas. Now, I'm not saying that's a hypothetical. I don't actually know how milk production works. That's just if you hear this and you're like, well, Ethan, that's not how milk, whatever. You're right. I don't know. I'm just using that as a hypothetical example. And so the the agricultural advancements we made because of the free manpower that happened in the Industrial Revolution have come full circle and allowed for people to have smaller farms that produce just as much produce as a larger farm with half the labor. And so you're actually enabling smaller operations. You are enabling, family-owned farms. And I forgot to pull the stats, so I can't remember exactly what it is, but I think 90% of all of the farmland in the country is owned privately by
Bill Gates.
No, by us, by regular people.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and 85% of that land, so like 90-something% of all the farmland is owned by individuals, just like regular, not high cap, whatever. Like
really?
Yeah, it's owned by people, regular people.
That surprises me.
80-something% of all of that land has been owned by the same families since the 1800s. So
you hear of all these family farms being sold off. I have a hard time believing that.
I mean, I think...
Unless everything I've heard is hype, but...
I think hearing individual anecdotal stories is one thing versus the actual broad... Because you do, obviously, Bill Gates in China is buying up massive amounts of farmland. That goes to show you
just don't realize how much
farmland is in the U.S. And so these families have owned these farms since the 1800s, and their farms are getting more productive. Their farms, they're getting more entrenched. So it's less likely, because of the technological advancement, that those people will have to sell those farms because they're making more money off of them.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about this thing we were talking about last podcast. Generational roots.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, technology
being able to stay in the same place,
right?
Technology and actually improve.
Exactly. Like imagine being able to, because you can grow this new type of plant. There's a hill that's existed in your family for generations. It's at a steeper grade, so the water runs down. It takes off the topsoil. It's really hard to get anything to grow there. All of a sudden, you have a type of grass that doesn't require
anchors really well.
That anchors really well, and you can
graze it.
Right, you can graze it, and then it adds topsoil to it, makes it a much more resilient spot of soil. All of a sudden, you can graze it, you can grow stuff on it. It's a whole new couple acres of land that you've had previously that you've never been able to turn into a productive piece of land. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, now it's producing money for you. It's producing things for you that you can actually use. And so, technological growth does have a feedback loop that allows decentralization in power and in production. So how does that tie into broadening your horizons? I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I would assume you didn't think that way before we started talking about this kind of stuff. And I certainly thought people who wanted to, like, one time
Ethan's about to diss my way of living.
No, I'm not.
Well, no, I mean what you previously thought.
Yeah,
that's
one of the very first Brotherhood meetings ever that we had. You and Chris were talking about how Chris has a forge that he powers with a bicycle, like he uses a bicycle chain or whatever, and I was like, these retarded Luddites, just get an engine. And now I'm like, much more like, yeah, okay. I totally understand where they're coming from. We gotta, like, to say that technological progress has not caused problems is retarded, like ignorant beyond, like it's just simple observation, And so
but people who are Luddites are probably not appreciative of all the advancements that they do benefit from.
Right. And so I think that's that's a good example of broadening your horizons, because and what's the benefit of that? What's the benefit of talking to somebody who you don't necessarily agree with all the time on something?
Lack of an echo chamber?
Yeah, lacking an echo chamber. What's the benefit of that? Well, I feel much more at peace more generally now that I have a more balanced view of the world. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's helped you feel less stressed about, seeing some new, godforsaken technology developing in the news. But like when I see, like I watched a video the other day of somebody talking about head transplants. Mm-hmm. So there's somebody's passed away, somebody has an ailing body that's dying. You can just surgically remove the heads, transfer one head onto the next, and now you've got a person who's not dying. Even
that's
though
horrifying.
That's horrifying. Now,
okay, we agree on that?
yes.
That's a bad thing?
That's a bad thing.
Okay. I thought you were about to be like, what amazing technology.
Maybe in 200 years that'll be an amazing technology or something.
No, it won't.
But
that doesn't change the fact that you're Frankensteining people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is.
I don't know. I obviously you can argue that that's one step down the road from a heart transplant.
Sure.
A few steps down.
But I don't feel, when I watch those videos, yes, it's creepy. I do get like weird chills watching. I get the uncanny valley effect, but I don't go, oh goodness gracious, we're just headed down we're headed to hell in a handbasket. This is not good. This is that hideous strength just playing out in front of us. Although that hideous strength is playing out in front of us. When I watch that, I go, all right, listen, if this ends up being some man-made horror beyond my comprehension, it won't actually survive. Like, maybe a generation of head transplants will occur, and then you'll have somebody become schizophrenic because their body's attached to someone else's body and their nervous systems can't wire. They kill themselves or whatever. Like,
I read an interesting sci-fi novel about that. It was about, they had all these, you could, in the novel, I think they're taking a ship and going to colonize a new planet, right?
Right.
And everybody's bodies their consciousness was separated out of their bodies for the long trip.
Right.
And so it was in a computer or something like that. So they had the consciences separate, the identities of those people sucked out of their bodies like there was no connection anymore.
Right.
Something happens with the ship. Most of the bodies or consciences most of the bodies are wrecked, I guess.
Yeah.
And the one surviving guy who's intact or already has his conscience, he decides to dump the consciences of people back into their bodies, but it may have been separate bodies. I can't remember.
Okay.
Maybe I'm mixing up books. Anyway, the point was, I think in the book he ultimately kind of makes the argument that something's off about these people, that there's some trace amount of you can't quite separate the soul from the body.
Right.
That it's not possible.
Right.
With that, even with that high level of technology, there's still something went wrong.
Right. And
they were unhappy in some deep-seated way that they couldn't identify.
Right. Yeah, and I think that kind of risk is very serious. But I think a lot of people are robbed of their peace by fear of technological progress, where I am not. And I previously may have been robbed of peace. People like me are robbed of peace when they think about, entering into some new dark age where there's no internet or something like that or whatever.
Oh, gotcha.
Where
Chris and I are like, I hope.
Right, exactly. So
wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
If the internet dissolved?
Yeah, exactly. So two of my now close
friends. This is
friends,
what we trained for.
It's here, baby. It's my time to shine.
All the preppers are like, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm not a prepper, but
yeah. And so I am significantly less worried about having some sort of imperial collapse that's like, the Roman Empire falling apart and having warlords or whatever, because I know that it's fine. People, yes. Are people going to suffer? Yeah, they will. But are things going to be okay? Am I capable of making my family okay during that process? Yes. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would imagine that you've had some level of peace. You're less worried about the progress of humans or the trajectory that we're on since I would say maybe you've had an experience similar to mine because we've broadened each other's horizons and perspective. Because I've experienced more peace.
Well, it definitely makes me think more about it and not just, even just here in this conversation now.
Yeah.
Thinking about, okay, yeah, I guess there has been benefit. Because, okay, the thing about air conditioning, though, is my concern is that all the technological progress makes people less tough.
Yeah.
We're all a whole lot sissier.
Yeah.
Which, is because everyone who would have died without the antibiotics or would have died. So maybe this is a dangerous line of thinking because it borders on, I don't know if it's eugenics.
Yeah, eugenics. That was the word I was thinking of.
Yeah. So it borders on that.
Right.
It borders on Nazi-like, kind of like, survival of the fittest. It's an evolutionary way of looking at the world.
Right.
And so do I actually wish that all the people who are not benefited by technology or medical process in some way simply didn't have it and would have died off? Yeah. No, I don't wish that. That would be ungodly of me
right.
to actually wish that.
Yeah.
I wish for a stronger humanity.
Yeah.
I wish... So again, this is bleeding over into like selective breeding for what you look for in the genetics of your animals.
Yeah.
You don't want your weak ones to survive.
Right.
You want them to die. You want or you not to suffer, but if you see a weak one, you're like, we're going to eat that one.
Yeah.
Because we don't want that one reproducing and passing on the bad genetics.
Right.
But the key difference is that they are not made in the image of God and we are.
Right.
So we should do everything we can to save human life. Whereas with animal life, we are to tend it and take care of it and be as merciful and kind to it as possible. And I think that means not keeping them in feedlots and feeding them grain when they're not made to eat grain.
Yeah, getting them so fat they can't walk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I have. There's certain things in farming that, just because they're not made in the image of God doesn't mean that you get to treat them like an inanimate creature.
You
like
don't get to be
plant.
cruel to them. Yeah.
Yeah. Plants are a different thing. There's levels of life value.
Right.
Plants are alive, but they have nobody's like you're walking around and you step on a weed.
Right.
You're like, oh no. Yeah. Existential crisis, which you would if you are in the atheists who are the Christian atheists who have a Christian moral background because of their American upbringing.
Yes.
But they don't recognize God.
Right.
And so their ideology is that nothing ultimately matters, but you should still be kind to people just because.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that actually comes from somewhere.
Yeah.
They just think like, well, yeah, this is the nice thing to do. It's like that doesn't matter.
Right.
To you and your viewpoint, that's illogical for them to take that position.
Right.
It's only because you want to live in the society that's already Christian in its background and you want to be comfortable in it. That's the only reason that you still want to be kind to people.
Yes.
It's not because of some inherent, like, it's of morals that you developed.
Right. That just exists for no reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because survival of the fittest would be the atheistic way of looking at everything.
Right. Eugenics would be if atheistic.
Everybody who depends on any medication is a drag on society in that viewpoint.
That's a Nietzsche thing, the Übermensch. That's like the.
So if you cannot survive anything, you might as well be.
Right.
Man in the High Castle, the series. Did you ever watch that?
No. I know what it is, but
I didn't read the book. I heard the book is better. We watched the first season or two, but there's the one of the higher ups in like Nazi America.
Yeah.
Is he's rigorously Nazi-like in all of his he buys into the ideology fully, but then his son, the doctor, who's like a family friend, almost like they're friendly.
Right.
And the doctor goes, I've diagnosed your child with this whatever neurological disease. Like, we have to put him down.
Right.
And the father's like, then he's caught between his affection for his son, his like 6 or 7 year old son.
Yeah.
Geez. And his ideology of like actually playing out and killing his son with a lethal injection.
Right. Because
he's bad for society.
Right.
And he ultimately ends up killing the doctor to protect his son.
Good for him.
So I mean, it's a fantastically played, great acting.
Yeah.
At least that part. So there was some really good parts to it.
Good.
But yeah, it's like he didn't play out his ideology because he chose the actual moral good,
right,
the right thing, which is to preserve a life that is imperfect.
Yeah.
Or that is weaker.
Or that we perceive to be. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
It is objectively weaker,
yes.
and that like that's all I mean.
Yeah, that's good
not
point.
Weaker like less value, weaker.
Right.
Women are the weaker vessel, but they are not worth less than men. So that's what I mean.
Yeah, and I think that's that is what am I trying to say? I'm trying to wrap it up. That's what I was going to do.
Good. Let's do it.
So, I think you want to do a doubleheader? We can do a doubleheader.
Possibly.
Okay. Maybe next episode we'll expand on this a little more. I got an idea. But guys, that's it for us. We love you very much. We were praying for you.
I prayed for you yesterday.
I prayed for you guys. Actually, I didn't pray for you this week. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was a little distracted.
Sorry. Usually you pray more for them.
Yes. Usually I pray at least a couple times a week. We are praying for you guys. Go to church, please. Broaden your horizons. Make some friends that disagree with you. I would say there are things that you disagree with people on for good reason, and so you don't need to.
Broadening your horizons doesn't mean the loose, stupid, liberal open-mindedness
Yes.
of like, well, you got to be open to everything, even cats being people,
Right.
or people being cats.
If your mind is too open, your brain will fall out. So
That's true.
Yeah. Do not broaden your horizons too much. Abortion is still an evil. Do not let somebody.
But know your arguments for why it is. Don't
Right.
just say like, "Oh, it is bad," and then refuse to talk to anybody about it.
Exactly. You'll sharpen your arguments by talking to people.
Iron sharpens iron. Talk to people who actually know what they're talking about.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So you guys have seen a good example of broadening your horizons today. Jason and I talking about technology. We obviously come from different camps. I think as the past few months have gone on, we've been doing this podcast together. We've moved more and more into agreement and coming more and more into the middle. I don't think we'll ever necessarily, like, Jason's never going to be as into the newest electrical device as I am, and I'm never, ever, ever going to use a hand scythe. But anyways, guys, we love you. Have a good week. We'll see you next time.